Since the 1960s, Liverpool's popular music prowess has achieved international prominence and renown, firstly with the Beatles and a host of other Merseybeat bands. By 1977, punk had arrived on the music scene, and local club owners and music enthusiasts Roger Eagle and Pete Fulwell set up Eric's, a club in which Liverpool youth could watch and form new bands. On the same street as the legendary Cavern Club, Eric's nurtured the formation of dozens of bands, among them Echo and the Bunnymen, The Teardrop Explodes and Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Not surprisingly, this intense and competitive musical scene was quickly called the New Merseybeat.
I think Roger Eagle and Pete Fulwell, who ran Eric's, definitely knew that they could create a scene because they knew about music and they knew about the history, about the cycles that go on in pop and rock, and I think they had more than a small hand in directing it, and creating the ambience or the environment for it to happen.
Well, it was the first club I'd ever been to, because me and Wiley went on the opening night when it was upstairs in a club called Gatsby's. I think they hired it for a month or something and put on. It was the Stranglers, Pistols, Runaways. They were the first 3 gigs that I remember seeing, and it was just great. The opening night, there was a queue right down Matthew Street, and to get in, it was 60 pence, I think, and you became a member for that. And me and Wiley were both underage, and it was like, will we get in? And then when we got in and we were a member, it was like mega,
Ian McCulloch and Pete Wiley, once inside the damp basement club, encountered a clique of glam punks, among them Pete Burns and Jane Casey.
Matthew Street is in quite a bad area for sewers, and every so often Eric's would flood, and you'd go downstairs and open the doors and there'd be water, knee high, and there'd be rats swimming in it. There were rats everywhere. Sometimes they'd just crawl out over the bar.
We weren't all dirty and grungy in ourselves. That came later with the mainstream punk movement. All of the sorts of punks or musos that I knew, even if it was Wiley, were incredibly vain. I mean, I know for a fact he had skin-tinted Clearasil in his shaving bag, but it was an exciting club. It was filthy, it was disgusting, but it did have a great atmosphere.
Big names like The Clash would play at Eric's, providing the inspiration for aspiring young musicians. One of the first local bands to get serious and get on stage was Big in Japan. The band's leader, Bill Drummond, had strong ideas about the group's image.
Bill was around a lot of that time, and when he decided to put the band together, it just seemed natural, really, that I would sing or scream or perform in it.
If there was a face of Liverpool at the time, she was the face. She was an incredibly striking character in the way she looked and her personality. And then at some point we got Budgie in, who'd been in various other bands, and everybody recognised Budgie was a really good drummer.
Big in Japan, it was like, you had to play fast. But then I kind of, from what I remembered, found out ways of appearing to play fast whilst not playing that fast, Eric's was, I don't know, basically you were living there, and we would rehearse in the daytime, and then we'd probably come down to hang out at night, and hopefully get a gig together as well. Big in Japan used it as a rehearsal space for that 6-month period I was with them, I think.
We got Ian Brodie in as well, who was this young lad. He was only 15 or 16 when I first met him, who was already a really good guitarist. Brilliant musician. So he gave us a real sort of musical solidity.
I know everyone seems to say, that I was the one who was musical, and probably comparatively was, I used to love the fact that Bill used to tune his guitar to a chord so he could just put his finger across every fret, and I just thought that was great,
Ian Brodie was a real pain in the arse. Ian Brodie was like Mr. #1 musician, even at that age. He was very young, but he was going to be an ace rock musician. There was no doubt about it. And here we were kind of having a great time, having a laugh, you know, messing about. And suddenly Brodie comes and he's got you rehearsing all the time and he's trying to make you sing properly. And it was just like chalk and cheese, you know.
Big in Japan included 17-year-old Holly Johnson, soon to become a key player in the Liverpool music scene.
The rest of the band hated the closeness between Holly and I and the way that we'd kind of, you know, we'd be pains in the neck and we'd always be trouble wherever we went. At the end of the day, that set the vibe, really.
The lineup of Big in Japan was in a constant state of flux, and Holly's bad timekeeping made him an early casualty.
As soon as Holly was gone, the chemistry had gone of the whole thing. And that was a mistake was made later in something else I was involved in. Getting rid of somebody, you could see all the problems with a certain person, and you don't see the positive part of what they bring to the chemistry of the situation. It must have been like in the Beatles, they must have looked at Ringo and thought, oh, have we got to put up this crap drummer? But if they got rid of Ringo, they'd have got rid of one of the most vital ingredients.
Dave Balfe, bass player with another local band, Dalek Eye, quickly became Holly's replacement.
You know, I got the job. It's a short answer. I had a Fender jazz bass at the time, and that impressed them enough, as much as anything, I think, and I got the job. So then I was doing Big in Japan during the day, and Dalek I Love You in the evenings.
Dalek Eye were just so brilliant. And Dave Balfe went and left and joined Big in Japan. He must have been mad. And it was terrible from that point on. We'd all decided to split up, and Bill and Dave had decided they were going to set up a record company, and they wanted to put out some unreleased stuff of Big in Japan as the first release on Zoo Records. And then, as I remember it, we were only supposed to have 3,000 printed, and then on the side, Bill and Dave got more printed up without telling us, but we all found out. And there was a massive row, and I don't think anyone spoke to any, you know, there was one of those. But and that's how it all ended.
The end for Big in Japan, but only the beginning for dozens of other would-be performers who shared an incestuous social scene and were determined to put a band together, hopefully before their mates did.
I mean, it was always my intention to sing, but I didn't know how you went about getting a band or anything. And by going to Eric's week in, week out, people were forming bands around me, and bands like the Spitfire Boys or even Big in Japan. And I thought, well, if they can do it, you know, they're all right, but they're not great, you know.
Yeah, there was a lot of bands who didn't actually play, or who were just like for the day, you know, who lived for the day, who had a name for the day, and the next day there was someone else.
It was important in that for the first time in my life, it was like, yeah, I can do this, you know. All that dreaming of doing stuff, people want me to be in a group with them, you know, so it was a good kind of confidence boost, especially for me because I was so shy and stuff, you know. And then from that, there was another thing, we actually did play twice, or once, with me and this group called UH ? Me and a bloke called Dave Pickett. We were more interested in getting T-shirts made with the tiniest writing we could get, just this thing, on. And then I kind of bowed out of that one.
I think the Nova Mob was a T-shirt. The band didn't really exist. It was only afterwards we thought, let's make it into a group. And we did one rehearsal. I remember doing one rehearsal.
In May 1977, 18-year-old Pete Wiley met 18-year-old student teacher Julian Cope on the dance floor in Eric's, a meeting which was to lead to the formation of another nearly band, the Crucial Three.
I'd been waiting to see the Clash, and I'd fought my way to the front. And I was at the front, except next to me at the front was this dickhead in a boiler suit dancing really, but this kind of rocking and back and forth dance. And he kept rocking back into me. In his book, he says that he turned around and gave me a manic punk stare and I backed off. And I say that I said, if you don't stop doing that, I'm going to chin you. And he says, oh, don't do that. Why don't we form a band, put our anger into guitars?
It was Pete's idea to call this group Arthur Hostile and the Crucial Three. And we kind of formed this band that never did anything. We had one rehearsal at my mum's house. With Julian playing this really horrible bass line, and me just mumbling over it, and Pete kind of playing guitar, and the drummer Steve Spence drumming on my mum's kitchen chair.
We had a song called The Salamine Shuffle, the chorus of which Mac wrote, and it said, when I have hives, I use calamine. When I want to dance, I do the Salamine Shuffle. It's a pop classic, Mac.
From that, it became this mythical thing, the Crucial Three, which I always try to deny ever existed, you know.
But Copey turned up with all kind of, I can't remember, something like, you know, life is a factory sprayed on his bass, and he changed his name to Juvenile. And these were like the dodgy fag end of London punk ideas, you know, like Degenerate and Eater. It was never cool, you know. So me and Matt kind of went like this, and then there was the final straw was Julian brought in this song he'd written, and it was Rent-a-Punk kind of thrash anthem, and there was only one line I can remember which went, and the apathy that's spreading through our country's furthest shores. And it was like, when he did it, me and McCulloch both knew that this was over, you know.
Eric's owner, Roger Eagle, easily persuaded Julian Cope and Pete Wiley to team up with the glamorous punk Pete Burns in a lineup called The Mystery Girls, who made it on stage once.
Roger Eagle just decided that I should be in a group because, you know, I dressed up freaky. And he kind of put a group together, which included Julian Cope and Pete Wiley. I can't really remember who else, so I can, but I'm not going to say. And I fronted it for one gig with Sham 69, and my life just completely changed. I got in free, got drinks free.
Burns was Burns with his makeup and his hair. Cope was in an overcoat, probably, playing his bass. I had my mum's white Mac with plastic gold buttons, white blouse with kind of blue flowers, a nylon blouse, red satin kecks, and a toilet seat that I used to wear.
We split up after that one gig because Pete Wiley wanted to wear a toilet seat on his head.
No toilet seats in electronic group The Id, an early home for Andy McCluskey from the Wirral. Andy went on to form Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark and brought his partners Paul Humphreys and a tape machine called Winston from across the Mersey to Eric's.
I never became part of the kind of the bedsit culture in Liverpool that people like Ian McCulloch, I think, and Copey and other people were involved in. And what was going on in the music, I mean, we would go over the river and go and see bands playing at Eric's, but somehow this river was a divide. We felt separate. And I think that later on, when we started to come and play as OMD in Liverpool, I think that the Liverpool bands felt we were separate. I mean, it was very kind of like, oh, they're not really Scousers, they're from the other side of the river, you know.
I remember the tape machine. I remember that dance with the bass guitar. I mean, he had it then. It was probably the first time he went on stage. It was that kind of, you know.
Unhip, actually, Andy, when he started out, it has to be said. He had a kind of curly perm and things, you know, and it was a shame. But he did have a great voice, and he did cover versions of Stranglers songs and things, but then he started to write his own stuff, and he wrote Electricity, and I mean, it was one of the first things to break through from the Eric scene.
Lo and behold, Electricity comes out. 2 weeks later, we get a phone call from a woman called Carol Wilson, who is starting a label which is a subsidiary of Virgin. And she asked if we had any more demos, which we didn't. We'd only recorded 2 songs to put on the record. So she said, well, are you playing any gigs? No, we weren't for 3 or 4 weeks. So she came up to Paul's mum's house on a Saturday afternoon when she was at work and trooped in with her new A&R man, sat on the sofa, and we went through our entire set of about 8 songs that lasted about 25 minutes. And she said, oh, yeah, that's great. And the next time we saw her, she handed us a contract. It was like, it was so easy, it was ridiculous. It was like, people say to me now, well, how do you get signed and what do you have to do? I was like, oh, bloody no, it just fell on my doorstep, it just happened.
OMD were up and running and left the Liverpool scene. Back at base and still looking for a successful beat combo was top dresser Pete Burns, whose next creation, Nightmares in Wax, this time made it onto vinyl.
Nightmares in Wax came about as we knew that if we did a gig and I looked really outrageous, somebody had put us in the studio. Just so we had a record, because everyone else did, and I hadn't, so it was just a thing I want to do a record. I couldn't get Liverpool musicians to work with me because even down to the days the Mystery Girls, Julian Cope would say, oh, I know, I've got a really good idea. You stand at the back with a blanket over your head and, I'll stand at the front, because they didn't want people to look at me. So I used to get, bin men, literally, who could play a guitar, to come and play guitar for me. And if they were any good, people like Wiley would jump out of a bush and say, you were really great last night at Pickwick's. Don't want to be with that loser. Come and join my group, And they would be interested because he got more coverage in Sounds and NME than I did, because they were really up the bum as well, those papers. They just couldn't stand the fact I was so fucking glamorous.
Pete Burns' old accomplice Pete Wiley had formed a band called Wah Heat and received glowing press for his early indie singles.
Someone remembers what you said, so you better pray.
I always presumed, for example, that I was going to be a star, But I didn't realise that, I think none of us realised there was work that went between where we were then and becoming stars, You kind of just took it for granted that you had the strength of character and the appeal and the charisma and the talent to be a star, without any of the kind of touring, the kind of ploughing through record company shit, that go, all the stuff that goes with these people who we call stars,
Ex-Big in Japan guitarist Ian Brodie had joined the original Mirrors, but was heading in the direction of record producer and had a hand in Wiley's first recordings.
I didn't know Pete that well, and I remember he was working in Probe at the time, and he phoned me up and said, we're going into the studio and we're going to record a song and Pete Fowell's going to pay for it. And, could you give us a hand? Is there anything, So, and I was going to London, but we met up the night before he went in and we took 2 guitars into Probe, he had the keys and we sat there and we sort of just changed things around on the song, and I lent him an amp, and said, do maybe when you record it, try doing this and you get a good, and a bit of stuff. And I went off and forgot about it. And then I remember hearing that single and thinking it was fantastic, which was Better Scream. And that surprised me. I'd always thought Pete was a really good talker, but I wasn't sure that, he could make a good record and that.
You better scream, 'cause here come the saints. You better scream, run away, here come the saints.
And so we had this reputation, we got a record deal off Warner Brothers and they were gagging to sign us, and we got a huge deal. At that time, Spandau Ballet and the Specials, who were the other kind of big things at the time, had both signed deals and we got a bigger deal than both of them. And all I thought was, wow, people give you this much money for doing what you like doing.
I can remember we used to share an office in a place called Bowl Street in Wah. We're upstairs, and we used to do terrible things to each other. Like, me and my keyboard player, Martin, who's like a genius of sick humour, he used to go upstairs and we'd steal the fan mail and we'd reply to it and say, drop dead, you turd. Never buy one of our records.
Ex-Crucial 3 member Julian Cope had put a band together and found a name, The Teardrop Explodes, in an old Marvel comic. Meanwhile, Bill Drummond, who had played in Big in Japan, had set up a small record label and was looking for new groups to sign.
And a green car.
Julian had got a new band every week, and because Big in Japan didn't exist anymore, I wasn't a rival anymore, so we could talk to each other, or be seen to be talking to each other. And he told me he got a new group called The Teardrop Explodes, and I thought, well, that's the sort of, that's the sort of name I want to see in the label. So I said, well, we'll do a record. We'll do a record with your group. No idea what they sounded like. No, I wasn't bothered. I just wanted to have a record by a group called The Teardrop Explodes.
I stand in the streets, I look for someone to meet, but you don't call me on phone. Oh, you're never alone. I wander around, I just wander around.
We released a single, the first single on Zoo, Sleeping Gas, and that got Single of the Week in a few of the music papers. And it sort of took off from there, really.
It was through Julian Cope that another ex-Crucial 3 member, Ian McCulloch, was to play in Eric's for the first time, as part of a trio with a drum machine called Echo and a guitarist called Will Sargent.
We all knew Copey, and he knew that me and Mac were doing this thing with the drum machine. They were doing a party for CF Mott, which is a college in Prescott, where Copey went, like teacher training college or something. And they were doing like this party at Eric's. It was on a Wednesday night. And he said, do you want to support us? And we just went, yeah, even though we didn't have any songs, or all we had was like these tapes done in, with no singing on or anything, because Mac wouldn't sing, He just played the guitar along with what I was doing,
Well, it was weird because we went on stage and the drum machine wouldn't work for about half an hour. So we were standing on stage. I stood there for 10 minutes in this red polo, and I thought, sod this, got to get off, It's unprofessional to be seen looking clueless, And I shot off back to the dressing room, and Will stayed on stage trying to fix the drum machine.
And we just did this one song, It was Monkey, it became Monkeys, because it was basically E all the way through,
All the girls are the same. They don't knock it, then rock it.
We did it. We did the thing. I just got the drum machine going. We all started playing. And Mac just became incredible all of a sudden, like this sort of quiet bloke that Wiley had told me he could sing. All of a sudden he was like Iggy Pop, with real cross between Iggy Pop and Mark E. Smith or something, like real serious attitude coming across, and everyone's like gobsmacked, as Scylla might say.
Suddenly there was two real bands, Echo and the Bunnymen and Teardrop Explodes. There's actually people in these bands, and they had no idea about playing outside Liverpool, and no real ambition to. All they wanted to do was get up. I think, they would have secretly harbour all sorts of ambitions, but ambitions they would talk about there didn't seem to be any more than wanting to get up at Eric's and play there. Anything more than that would have been considered uncool, I think. But because in Big in Japan we played all over the Northwest, and I'd got to know all the promoters and got their phone numbers because I used to deal with them. I started phoning them up and say, got these two bands, Echo and the Bunnymen and Teardrop Explodes, 60 quid and blah de blah de blah, whatever. And so we started getting them dates.
Bill Drummond had teamed up with Teardrop's bass player Dave Balfe to co-manage both bands. Equipment was in short supply, and the band members could be very demanding.
The first few months and couple of singles, we could only do gigs together because we each needed each other's equipment, and I was providing the bass guitar for them and stuff like that, and I think the bass equipment for both the Bunnymen and the Teardrops. And and it was like a long time later when they actually did a publishing deal that they could afford enough equipment to actually do gigs in separate cities on the same night.
Taking advantage of, breaking the back of love. Easier said than done, you said, but it's what's difficult to say.
The Teardrops and Bunnymen soon signed to major labels, and their careers began to take off. Now working as a producer, ex-Big in Japan guitarist Ian Brodie was involved with the Bunnymen from the early days.
There was a song called The Back of Love. It wasn't called that then. It was called Taking Advantage, because the rest of the group were really angry at Mac because he wanted to have love in a title. And they were really... I remember sitting there with this ridiculous conversation while they were all chatting about it in a cafe, and Mac saying, but it's not love, it's the back of love.
Taking the fancy drug. We're breaking the back of love. Breaking the back of love.
By the early 80s, the Teardrop Explodes had released 2 albums receiving chart and critical success. But tensions flared up in the band, not helped by the fact that their bass player, Dave Balfe, was also their manager.
He made a lot of things happen, Dave, yeah. But he also caused a lot of trouble as well, I think, down the line. But I think, you know, they wouldn't have done half the things the Teardrop's done. Maybe if Dave was not there, you know.
I had a lot of energy and a lot of conviction as to what should be doing. I wasn't right all the time, but you know, I was pushing very strongly, and I was a right bastard in those days.
They had a major fight one time in the rehearsals. Julian just lost it totally and attacked him, and I sort of let it go on for a bit, you know. Sort of Julian was beating him a bit, and I had to pull him off then. So that's enough.
They'd all bitch about each other behind their backs, whereas I'd be very forceful and direct and in trying to push and pull people and saying that performance wasn't good enough and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And I think it was a thorn in their side, which I hope at the end of the day was a positive thorn in the side. It wasn't certainly not purely positive. I mean, there's a lot of times I just really irritated the hell out of people in those days. I'm sure I still do.
It was all like going for us in England, but we weren't there, you know. You know, we were ringing back home to England and the families and friends were saying, oh yeah, you've been on this and you've been on that, and we were playing out in Lubbock, Texas, somewhere like that, you know, to like 4 people. We'd been to Australia, New Zealand, and the last 3 weeks we were in New York. And Balfe and myself went for a coffee one morning and said we decided we wanted to go home, and that was it. And we went to see Julian and he said, you want to go home? We said, yeah. So we called it 3 weeks tour and we went back home. I think our girlfriends had just come out as well. They'd only been there 2 days. They were pissed off, to say the least.
But I think I was the guy who kind of packed in. I know I was the guy who said, right, I'm going home about 5 days from the end of the tour. I'd just had enough of sort of weeping uncontrollably and all kinds of stuff. And everyone else was dead grateful that I'd done it. And looking back, the tour manager should just have, you know, gone and took me to a doctor, give me some Valium, and got me through the end of the tour. But that was that.
In what was to be a final attempt to salvage the Teardrops, an album was in production and a UK tour was planned. The tour didn't show the band at their best, and the album was never completed. Soon after, Julian announced that he was going to pursue what was to be an erratic solo career. By 1982, it was time for Pete Wiley to experience mainstream success for the first time with a song called The Story of the Blues.
Story of the Blues was out for maybe 2-3 months before it was a hit, you know, and it was only a fluke that made it a hit, really. Peel and Kid Jensen kept playing it, you know, and Janice Long would play it. Then Christmas '82, there was a TV show on Granada, and Duran Duran got caught swapping the tapes by the MU. So they got kicked off, and we were the nearest kind of viable replacement. So we went on and did Story of the Blues, and they kind of went mad, you know. When it was a hit, they obviously thought we were going to continue this rich vein of Phil Spector kind of stuff, and I just thought, well, that's not what I want to do, you know. I like the fact that sometimes I'm the big star and sometimes I'm the, you know, trippy, sold 2 records, please help me, you know, kind of guy.
As Pete Wiley began a patchy chart career. His old adversary, Pete Burns, found himself dressed and nearly ready for pop success with his latest lineup, Dead or Alive.
We came out of Liverpool, and I don't know what happened, but because I suppose I was vaguely glamorous, I wasn't associated with the Liverpool scene anymore. I was a contender for the pop field, and going into mainstream success, as I say, after being in Liverpool and working on that indie scene was really horrific.
I get to know your name. Well, I can trace your private number, baby. All I know is
When I finished making the album and we'd done our thing around Europe and we were #1 in England, I left my flat one day to get a cab on a place called Princess Avenue. I lived off Princess Avenue. And of course I felt like Mr. Silly pop star, you know, dark glasses and headscarf and stuff like that. And all these schoolgirls came running towards me because they'd recognise me, and then they started screaming, "Get out of the city, you filthy queer, you filthy puff," and throwing things and kicking the cab and stuff like that.
Schoolgirls.
Yeah, schoolgirls. I expected to be like adored by them because I was a pop star, but it was these schoolgirls, and they were big fuckers. You know, they were really like farm women. Even though they'd seen me on the street every day and laughed at me, when I got success, when they saw me on the street, they hated me. I was the stately homo, the local freak. But once I got success and they thought there might be money, it was a real risk.
By their fourth album, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, were finding that life in the pop world felt horribly like working for a living.
One minute I was on Top of the Pops, the next minute I was flying to New York or Los Angeles or Paris, Rome. And then the next minute I was back home at my mum's house in my bedroom where I could touch all the walls like this. And I was still, even after 4 albums, 5 million selling singles, I was still taking home 45 quid a week. I think, strangely enough, it's when things started to feel wrong to me is when I started to realise that I'm in a business here now. This is how I earn my living. That was the beginning of me realising, ooh.
Yankee roll, I call your name.
Since big in Japan, Holly Johnson had been recording solo, but his style was to change radically when he founded Frankie Goes to Hollywood and teamed up with old Eric's associate, Paul Rutherford. The original Frankie members spent £600 on a promotional video, which record companies found just too hot to handle.
The manager was saying he remembers taking it to EMI, and they'd heard about it through somebody else who he'd been to see. And he said, well, let's go to the video room and watch it with this A&R guy. And as he's walking up, there's people coming out of offices and saying, oh, he's got that video. It's like it's some like big deal. And he said that when he put it on in the video machine, he turned around, there's like about 16 people standing in the room waiting to see this video. And you'd think, oh, that'd be great, you'd have no problem getting a deal, but everyone just went, whew.
Relax, don't do it when you want to go to it. Relax, don't do it when you want to come. Relax, don't do it.
We were actually on the verge of disbanding because this was going on for like a year, and it was really like depressing.
This is the original version, which was sent to the Tube but never shown.
I mean, I've looked at that video quite recently. It'd be fine now, you know what I mean? It's just, I think, it's seeing a band on sort of 6, 7 o'clock TV, maybe having mine and Holly's arse slashed across the screen is like maybe a bit much for someone coming home from work and about to chow down the egg and chips, you know what I mean? But I'm sure they'd love it now.
Holly Johnson and Paul Rutherford styled the early Frankie look on the US gay club scene, despite the fact that 3 out of the 5 band members weren't actually gay.
You never thought about it, you know, it was like you'd think, oh, why don't you wear these leather pants with like no arse in them? It's like, okay. I remember this very early on, stuff coming out in the sun, and my mum ringing me up and saying, "You're not gay, are you?" This whole gay thing just got blown out of proportion, and then the first thing I see is like there's a front cover of the NMA with Holly and Paul in rubber vests, and then the penny dropped, and it was like, hang on, we're playing in heaven. Oh, I get it now.
I think Frankie was different mainly because me and Holly were different, because we went from like a strictly rock background. Everyone was really into like rock music. I mean, their exposure to dance music came, I suppose, with the advent of Frankie as well. You know, I mean, that was, but basically they were still like they're all still rockers, all rockers lads, and we're all disco queens.
Frankie Goes to Hollywood finally got a record deal and top producer Trevor Horn to work on the Frankie sound.
Trevor Horn didn't wave a magic wand over them. I mean, they were like that before he came along, although I'm sure he'd like to take all the credit for inventing that sound. They did definitely sound like that. They were different.
Relax, don't do it when you wanna go to it. Relax, don't do it when you wanna go. Relax, don't do it.
There's Mad Max with KY Jelly. But the music definitely was something that I aspired towards, because it was disco with a heavier slant. It wasn't disco like Andrea True Connection or something like that. It was a heavy, dirty disco. And I must admit that there was a point, not when Frankie had made a record with Relax, but there was a point where I went to see them live. I was so jealous.
Their first single, Relax, sold quickly, and after complaints about the lyrics and a BBC ban, sold even quicker.
Suddenly we've got 3 consecutive #1s, so we're matching like Beatles records, and we're matching sort of like whatever it is. It's all kind of gone nuts, and we're going nuts at the same time. We're having a fun time doing it.
Holly was a bit older than us, so in that way he's a bit more mature and not as wild. I think he thought that we were being perceived as like these yobs, and I don't think he wanted to be seen as that. I think he wanted to be seen as a bit more of a sophisticated artist. Halfway through the second album, we decided we didn't want him anymore, and I think we rang Wiley.
3 times they asked me, and the first time he was still in the band, and he took it personally as though I'd kind of engineered it, when it completely came out the blue to me, you know. And I said at first I couldn't replace Holly. If you just wanted somebody to replace Holly, I couldn't do that because he's so good at what he does. It's not that I didn't admire his performances and his lyrics and, you know, all that stuff.
We were staying in Jersey writing some songs, and Holly was in Guernsey. That's how bad it was, you know. It's like, I ain't even going on the same island as them. And we cleared the air and finished it, but by then the rot was in, you know. It was only a matter of time before it was all going to go.
It was really ugly. It wasn't happy, and then having to turn it on for like kind of 2 hours, you know, while you're playing things, and then come off and it'd be like we're all back again. Because it was actually we were getting physical before we were going on. Everyone's arguing that the intro music's on, and there's like 20,000 people screaming because you're just about in, and then someone decides to land a punch on somebody. It's like, oh, for God's sake, you know what I mean? Get it together, lads. You know what I mean? And then it was all march out, and when they finally cajoled us into it and pushing us out, you know what I mean? By the end, it was just silly, you know what I mean? It was impossible.
The split was painful and made worse by a long-running but ultimately successful legal dispute with their record company.
For a while, but after splitting up, me and Holly, but we didn't kind of it screwed the relationship really, and we didn't speak for years. We've had the last couple of years though, we've had a bit more contact and stuff, but we lead very different lifestyles. He's much quieter than I am, you know what I mean? I think I'm just coming round to that one. I'm kind of going into my rodal phase, I think. But that happens, doesn't it? Like that's what family trees are about. You branch off and you kind of connect with something else going on. And it's just I've gone that way and he's gone that way, and I'm sure the twain will meet one day. You know what I mean? And It was maybe, who knows?
Although never reaching the heights of Frankie pop stardom, the Bunnymen had had a substantial career, but by the late 80s, Ian McCulloch was becoming disillusioned.
A lot of the mystery had gone, but we were still doing good gigs and stuff. We did a tour of Brazil, which we probably never played better ever, you know. And it was a really successful tour, but again, it didn't feel as good as playing to maybe 200 people in 1979.
It was at this point, you know, Mac was completely separate to the rest of us. Like, we'd go on the tour bus in America and he'd fly so he could stay in bed another couple of hours. You know, ridiculous, stupid things like that, you know. And he was separating himself all the time. I never used to see him except on stage. He stopped coming to sound checks as well, you know, which was like weird, you know. He was starting to think he was like God, you know. Even God has to sound check sometimes.
I just felt something bad was looming, you know, within the group. You know, we'd do a few fights here and there. Me and Les usually. There was one sudden massive one where I won't go into it, but it was quite funny looking back, but it was well heavy, you know, and he's a strong sod as well. And he suddenly headbutted me, killed, but I got up, you know. Well, I was actually already down when he headbutted me, but it was just all that kind of stuff going on. It was like, oh man, it's got to be more fun than this, you know.
There was a phone call where I sort of said, look, we're carrying on. And he just said, you know, he called me a twat and that, and that was that, you know. And I said, well, that's what's happening, see ya, you know.
Just said, you bastard, you know. And Will said, well, some of my favourite groups have done that, you know, gone on. And I said, who? He said, the Buzzcocks. And I said, you know, and then I said, who else? And he said, Pink Floyd. I said, yeah, great, one of my favourites, you know. So then, and he said someone else, though. Some real bizarre group, like, so then Mud or someone, you know. I hung up on him.
I wasn't going to do it until bloke at the record company said, why don't you get a new singer? And I thought, because it's the sort of thing your sort of mum would say, isn't it, you know? Oh, he was rubbish, get a new singer, you know. You think, oh, shut up, mum, sort of thing. You don't understand. But because this bloke at the record company suggested it, I thought, bloody hell, you know, if they're suggesting it, maybe it is feasible. Genesis did it. It was sort of maintaining something, but it wasn't really going anywhere. Nobody, it was just seen as a total embarrassment. Like, you know, we never got written about at all. Like, you know, in the papers, just ignored us completely. It was like, Bunnymen without Mac, 9 danker. You know.
The breakup was bitter, and Will and Mac didn't speak for a year, and only then because of the death in a motorbike accident of their drummer Pete de Freitas.
When Pete died, the night that we found out, I went round, you know, we hadn't spoken for a year then, or 9 months or something. I went round and it was all really emotional and stuff. And then we went to the funeral and then didn't speak for the next 3 years or whatever, 3.5.
With the KLF, we're on Mount Fuji in Japan. We're searching for something, so we can't be doing Top of the Pops, but I hope you enjoy the video.
Bill Drummond, the man who gave the Bunnymen their start, had been working behind the scenes in the record business, but by the late 80s began his assault on the chart system with a series of well-publicised scams and returned to the stage as prankster, subversive, Time Lord and justified ancient of Moo Moo. Drummond deliberately shrouds the activities of the KLF and K Foundation in layers of mystery, always refusing to say exactly what it all adds up to.
I can't talk about any of these things. I'm not in a position to. I couldn't even start to. they were things that have been there forever. They were there before I was ever there. And now they're still there somewhere.
Roddy spent most of the 80s behind the mixing desk, but recently top producer has become top pop star with his band The Lightning Seeds.
Doing The Lightning Seeds started again from writing a couple of songs and then feeling like I'd like someone to hear these songs. And you know, it was funny for me. Originally I thought, well, I'll do these songs and I'll get someone to sing them, and then no one turned up, and I thought, well, it's better, you can't have a row with them if it's you, you know. So I ended up trying to sing, and I was very unsure about singing it, and I sort of, you know, recorded the first LP, came back and thought, like, well, you know, this'll get it out my system. And it was a real surprise when it was a hit, you know.
Although rarely seen in the UK music scene these days, it's nice to know that Pete Burns is, quite seriously, after all these years, big in Japan.
People say to me, what are you doing now? And they expect me to say working for the council. You know, I've worked a lot in Japan. I've worked in America. I've had hit singles in America and Japan and stuff, and Europe, and I work out there. It's been like one long night out, largely. It's like I went out sometime in 1977 and I haven't gone home yet. I don't know if there's been any successful groups out of Liverpool for a long time because I don't pay attention to the music press, but it was really one of the best things. When you hear that song, New York, New York, if you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere. I mean, they should rewrite that for Liverpool.
Life goes on day after day after day after day. Hearts torn in every way. So ferry cross the Mersey, 'cause this land's the place I love. And here I'll stay, and here I'll stay. People, they rush everywhere, each with their own secret care. So ferry cross the Mersey, 'cause this land's the place I love, and here I'll stay. And here I'll stay. People around every corner, they seem to smile and say, we don't care what your name is, boy, we'll never send you away.